Hey guys, welcome back. In this tutorial I'll be going over Maya 2018 render passes. I'll be using Arnold lights and Arnold materials. I have a very simple scene set up here. I'm going to keep it fairly basic so it doesn't get too complex, and you get a general overview of how to create render passes. Okay, so as I mentioned, I have a couple of Arnold surface shaders. Just standard surface shaders I got from in the Arnold tab down here and went down to surface shader. Okay, so I created 3 of those and applied it to this character, the floor, and this box that the character is sitting on. Now there are no lights in the scene, so I've kept it stock standard at the moment. Okay, so what we'll be interested in doing straight up is a quick render test just to see exactly what we're viewing here in the viewport. So I'm going to come up to Arnold and Arnold render view. Okay, so I'm just going to increase this with middle mouse button. Now if I hit play on the right here, and it's all black, okay, which signifies, hey, there's no lights in your scene, so you're not going to see anything. So I'm just going to hit stop up here. This is important. You want to stop it while you're making adjustments, otherwise it keeps rendering in the background on the fly. Actually, it's an IPR renderer, so it just keeps rendering over top. So pushing stop here really helps. One more tip is when you are rendering, if you come to here, view, test resolution, I brought mine back to 50%. Okay, just so as I can quickly move through and set up my render passes without waiting for it to iterate each render. Okay, later on I'll go to 100. Alright, but just for now I'm going to keep it fast, and we can move around the viewport easier. Okay guys, so let's get started. Okay, well, let's introduce an Arnold light. Arnold lights. I like to start out with the SkyDome. Let's do another render straight away. I'll hit it. Okay, so I'm able to see something. That's a good start. Cool. So I'll push stop. That'll do for now. Put this over here just out of the way a little bit. Now what's interesting here is in the attributes editor for this this particular SkyDome, you'll notice it's white background. That's because the color's white. Now it has to be fairly bright for it to be able to cast light. Okay, that's what it's basically working on. It's a bit like an area light. You need some bright hue, bright color to be able to throw light. You could also place an image, a background image, etc., and that will, or a HDR image, that'll generate the actual background hue onto your character as well. But for now, what we're interested in here is the resolution. You could up that to around 3000, or even 3000 is a good starting point. Okay, especially for your renders. Up that, and you'll want to increase your samples to around 5 for that way it reduces all the noise in your shadows. Okay, that's important. Also, later on, not in this tutorial, I'll be going into AOVs, so it's good to have AOV indirect turn on. Okay. Now, one last thing I will mention regarding this area light, this dome light. Notice here under visibility you've got camera. If you bring that all the way down to 0, it will still render out the light on spill light onto your character, but it won't show the white background. Instead it'll come up black like this. Okay, so I pulled camera down. If I bring it up a bit, there we go, you can see it. So I'll actually pull that right down and I'll push stop. Okay, so this is a good start basis for me to keep on adding lights to my scene. So I'm going to actually drop in let's try a spotlight. So I'll go create lights, and I'll drop in a spotlight. Let's place the spotlight to the center of my scene here. You can actually view it if I just move it over a bit, and if I push 7 on my keyboard, now I can actually view the lights directly in the scene, real time. See that? And another tip, with the light selected, I can go panels, look through selected, and now I'm looking through that light, and I'm just going to pull backwards a little bit. I'm going to put the light right over here. About here. And I'm going to adjust the cone angle, the penumbra, so it feathers that light out, and the drop off a little bit. It's also good to introduce decay, because light does not really stretch to infinity. Notice a torch, for example, it does keep on going, but the fact is it does decay over time, doesn't it? So I'm going to introduce quadratic, and when you introduce quadratic, you really need to increase your intensity. So for now, I'm going to blast that right up to around about 1000, and come back into here and see what I get. Now it hasn't really done much at all, so I'm going to bring this up to maybe even 10,000. Oh, I better push stop. Bring this up to maybe 10,000, and I'm just seeing what I'm getting here. Arnold. I might even want to bring the exposure up under the Arnold tab. Bring that down to about 5. Okay, so I like to start off quite high with my intensity, and I adjust the intensity and the exposure. Bring this one up to maybe 10 now. Now I'm starting to get it. Okay, that'll do for the purpose of this tutorial. So I'm starting to get some deep shadows coming through here. Okay, spilling onto the box. Cool. I'll push stop, and let's carry on. Okay, let's jump straight into render passes now. So render passes is beside your hypershade icon over here, and what we're interested in here is this box and this little plus sign. Hitting that once. This is our first render pass, so I'm going to do a diffuse. Okay, I'll just call it diffuse pass. Now straight away you need to right click, create collection, and I'll just call this one diffuse pass 1. Okay, and I need to select the objects that I want to add to this diffuse. So it's going to be my box, my ground plane, my character, what else? Oh, and my lights. And I will click add over here to add them into this little panel on the right. There they are. So this is my first pass, diffuse pass, and everything's been loaded up, populated in the right here. Okay, so let's have a quick look. Now if I try and check this diffuse pass, I like to do all the checks with the Arnold render view open. And to be able to do a check, you need to make sure, this is really important, that this little eye is on. By default, it'll be up here. Now this one is what you call a beauty pass, and it will always render out everything in your scene, hence a beauty pass. Okay, looks beautiful, everything's great, but later on you'll want to turn on this little eye. Okay, and one more thing, this little clapperboard here, this is signifying which of your layers will actually be rendered out. Okay, so I could turn that off, that will not render. Turn it on, I could turn this one off, the beauty pass will no longer render. So I'll leave this one on. Okay, great, let's go for it. Let's do a quick little test. I've also noticed I haven't placed anything on the eyes here, but we'll just carry on. Push stop. Okay. So this first pass is working, but the fact is we don't want to see the shadows, do we? We only want to see the diffuse. So the color. We want to knock out the shadows. So let's try that. So to do that, what we have to do is come in and we need to create an override. And we'll be creating overrides for most of these passes. So this first one is going to be a shadow override. so I do not wish to see the shadows. So if I select the objects that I do not wish to see shadows on, it'll be my character. Okay, first up, and you can only do one object at a time. So I'm going to come over to the left in the attributes for that character, and I'm just going to drill down this one here, the second tab along, the shape, and then I'm going to come down to Arnold, and you'll notice here cast shadows and primary visibility. Well, I do want to view my character, but I do not wish to see the shadows. So I'll right click on the shadows and I'll go create absolute override. It turns orange, signifying, hey, you've created an absolute override. Next, what's important here is you turn it off. So now if I come back through and I do another test, once again, here we go. Before I do that test, see how it's created an override? It's created another layer and my overrides here. So if I now test that quickly, there we go. I no longer see shadows from my character. Okay, so that's great. That's how you'd generate your diffuse. Next up, I'm going to create a shadow pass. All I want to see are only the shadows. By the way, we're generating all these to take into an application for post-production like After Effects or Nuke, where we can layer all of these different image sequences together, and we have a lot more control over the character then. Okay, so I'm going to minimize this one and I'll create a new one here, and this one I said was my shadows. Right click, create collection. This is my shadow pass. Okay, now let's grab the objects that we want to go into that shadow pass. Well, I'm going to need lights, so I'll grab my lights. I'm going to need my objects and my character and add. There we go. So to generate a shadow pass, what we do, let's first click the shadow, so the eye. What we need to do here is click our actual collection, right click the selection, so right click it and come down to material override. Click that, and then up here, override material, click the little checker box, and this takes us into the hypershade. So what we're interested in here is Arnold, because I'm rendering out an Arnold, and you want the AI shadow matte. Click that. There it is up here. Now, if all going well, I should be able to click my shadows here, and I'll do another rendering pass, and it comes out black. Okay, black like this. Now you might be thinking, well, that doesn't do much, but the fact is, if I click this little button here, there we go. This is showing us the alpha on and off. There we go. So I'm actually seeing the shadows here, and this is what you should see. The shadows turn up white, and the rest of it, the neutral area, will be black. Now in post-production, once you take this into After Effects, you'll actually flip this around so it's like a negative, and you bring the shadows back. So this is what you want to see. Okay, good. So let's carry on. Now I'll create one more layer here. One will be an ambient occlusion pass, so I'll create one more. Hit my plus. I'll just call this one AO. I'll right click again, create collection. I'll call this one my AO pass. Enter. Once again, I need to add my objects. Now with the AO pass, you do not need to add lights. I'll just grab my objects and my geo, and I'll go add. Okay, so I've got my alien, my plane, ground, and my cube that he's sitting on. Now we want to create the AO pass. Now the AO pass, once again, this time around, we right click on our pass, and we go, this time it's going to be a shader override, not a material, a shader. Okay, and I come up to the little checker box again. This time we come back down, Arnold, and there we go, AI ambient occlusion. I'll just click on shader so you can see it here too. Do you notice here? Shader, it's at the very top there. So I'll click that one. And this is a shader, so this is a shader override. Let's see if it's worked. Now to test it, what do? We need to click our AO pass. Now we can check it. So we bring up our Arnold render view and I'll hit play. And oh, I better turn off alpha, so up here, and there we go. This is what ambient occlusion should look like. Now if you do need to make adjustments to ambient occlusion, you can do so. Over here you got samples, spread, which is the fall off amount. You might want to bring the fall off a little bit. See, you can bring it higher or lower. I tend to keep it fairly well diffuse, default. I'll go 4 for the samples. Okay, and I'm happy with that. So that's an ambient occlusion pass. All of these passes will be taken through into Nuke or After Effects. I have my first diffuse pass. Let's check it. There's my diffuse. Okay, now let's say I wanted to isolate individual objects, like perhaps I want to do a render pass only with my character, because when we take this into for comping, we only want to see our character in a black background. Let's try that. So I'm going to create a brand new pass just to show you guys. Another one. This one, I'll call this one character diffuse. Right click, I'll go create collection. I'll call this one char diffuse pass. You can call it whatever you wish, just make sure that it has meaning to yourself when you because later on it'll create it'll generate folders, many folders, and it helps if you put a name here. That way you can understand what's what in each folder. Okay, okay, cool. So we're gonna, this time I'm gonna grab my character, add him. Okay, I'm not worried about anything else because I only want to see the character, and I'm going to add my lights, of course. So I'll grab my SkyDome and my spotlight, and I'll add those. Alright, so once again, I'd simply create a an override, but this time remember it'd be a diffuse, so I don't want shadow. I could simply click the actual character. I'm going to come down and click that actually. There we go. So there's just the character, by the way. And this is, you know, you could run with this if you want to. Purely like this without the shadows. It's your call. Okay. So that's the character diffuse. Fantastic. I'm going to push stop. If I wanted to remove the shadows, I would then have to select my character here in my main viewport, come over and go to the body shape, the shape, and once again under the Arnold drop down you need to right click and remove the shadow. So create an absolute override, turn it off. Okay, and that's it, guys. There you go. So all the shadows are now off. Okay, I hope that helps. And then just one more thing regarding, let's say you've now created all of your different passes. You have your character, maybe your background objects, all in different layers. I would definitely put foreground and background assets within your scene into different passes. It just gives you more control when you move into post-production. Okay, one last thing is I would definitely be rendering out. When you go to render, change to your rendering tab, and under render you'll want to use image sequence. Do not use a batch render, because we're on educational license, use an image sequence. If you batch render, you'll get a watermark through each image. So you want to go render sequence. Okay, and to actually set up the render, you go to your rendering settings. Make sure you understand the path where you're saving it to. It's here. If you want to change it, you go up to Edit, Project Image Directory, and change it there. You want to push out an EXR file, and you want to make sure that you change from single frame to name plus extension down the bottom, and then put your frame range in, and then change to your camera. Mine's camera 1. Presets, I'll change custom to, I'm interested in HD 1080, which is 1920 by 1080. Okay, and then I should be good to go. I would highly recommend, before you start pushing out an entire sequence, to test individual images. So you could change this back to single frame and just push out a couple of single images just to make sure everything's working okay. Then flip over to name hash extension. One more tip, up here in the file name prefix, if you wanted to, you could actually put a name in here. So you could have the pass name. Okay, or you can even put your own in here. You could put in here whatever you wish. So you just right click, and I'll just go insert pass name. Okay, and then check everything. Check your Arnold renderer. I like to bring diffuse up to 3. If I had specular, there's no subsurface scattering, so I'd take that down to 0. There's no volume light, so I'd take that to 0. It just speeds up your actual your final renders.